Hello, hello.
Welcome to another Tuesday podcast live with Joe and Jen. I'm Joe.
You are.
Well, today I am.
I'm Jen, and we are so excited to be here today. We were talking about the state of the market, real estate investing. How are you doing creative deals with the way things are? Today is Tuesday, March 12th, 2024.
Yay, and today is a very special day for me. It's my 4-year anniversary, guys. 4 years ago today was my last day working at my corporate W-2 job. Some of you, probably all of us remember, but 4 years ago, COVID was just starting to be a real thing. And shortly after this is when all of the state that we lived in originally, New York, closed down. And from sitting home with my wife for a few weeks, she says, "You're not going back to work. Now is the time. We're going to do this full time. We're going to do it now." And I'm going to tell you, honestly, I thought she was crazy at first. There are sometimes I still think she is, but she was right.
I am crazy
on that matter. And it was a great time to start our business full time is what? In the beginning of a global pandemic.
Mm-hmm. So we did it scared. We did it not really knowing what was happening, but honestly, it was the best decision. So we can definitely talk more about that. If you guys have questions, as always, but there's no better time than now. So you can't rewind the clock, and neither can we. But what can we do starting today, moving forward, being able to find deals, structure them? That was a comment that came up today in small group was, how do you make a deal happen when, interest rates are high and, payments can be a little bit wonky. So I want to talk about that.
Yeah. Well, you know what? If you're going to go to the bank and you're going to buy a house now at today's rates, at today's prices, and then you plan on renting that house out and you're expecting cash flow, it's not working. And I'm hearing a lot of frustrations from a lot of my real estate investing friends who they want to buy real estate. They want to be able to have a business and own rentals. But the challenge is at a 6, 7, 8% rate, whatever they're coming in at right now, if they're going to have to put down 20% of a property, or sometimes if they could finagle less, but 20% down, just to lose $300, $400, $500, $1,000 a month is not a sustainable business model. And that doesn't make sense. So that's why we love creative finance, because there's so many of these amazing deals out there. So what does creative finance means? It just means it's a big umbrella term. We hear that all of the time. There's many ways to buy real estate without going to a bank. And we didn't know that when we first got started. But then if you think about it, it's been going on forever.
I honestly too, when we first met, I had no idea. I always thought investors were these big, which I guess would be a hedge fund, or those people up in the big offices, and they owned all the properties. I lived in apartment buildings, but I didn't really think much about, even though you grew up in it, the mom and pop kind of landlords. But again, there's people who are accidental landlords, and they get into it not really understanding that it is a business. You have to take care of your properties or have systems in place to be able to do so. You can't just have a property, stick somebody in it, and hope for the best. You have to have some sort of plan.
Yeah, you're definitely going to need a game plan. And this is where myself and Jen really saw the value in coaching, working with some of the most amazing coaches in this space for a very long time, spent a lot of time with great people, learning from their wins and their mistakes too. Because I think you'll learn just as much from some big mistake than you would from the wins. Right. So this is where we, hooray to us, 4 years now going strong, and the market. Okay, so that's what we're going to talk about today. We've seen the market go up. We've seen the market go down. In the last 4 years, it's been just out of control. Mm-hmm. And this really reminds me, and I know it's different, so it's not really the same, but this reminds me in 2004, 2005, 2006, the last few years, because that's when you and I bought our own houses back then. And if you remember back then, if you were going to buy a house, the market was pretty hot. It kept on going up.
I was able to buy a house with $1,000 down. Did you know that?
Well, you had some help with the mortgage people.
But what? That's not happening.
Yeah, so I think that probably caused some of the issues that.
Well, that's what I'm saying. It's on a teacher's salary, it wasn't a huge expensive house, but they were allowing things like that.
Yeah, and I think because of that, getting a mortgage was really easy to qualify. People were buying houses, mm-hmm. and it was happening a lot. So I know when I bought my first house that I lived in,
Yeah, they qualified you for way more.
Oh, they qualified for me for over double. But I remember looking at houses. I'm like, oh, I like this one. It just hit the market. And they're like, oh, that just sold for over asking. And I'm like, wow. So this was happening in 2004, 2005, 2006. And what really caused that was anybody, if you could fog a mirror, could probably get qualified for a mortgage back then.
Which wasn't a good situation, because then you have people in there that are getting into houses like way over their head.
Yeah.
So do you think that happened in the last couple of years?
Oh, for sure. Well, and I think it's a little bit different this time. And I'll explain why. So back then, people were just buying houses because they could. $1,000 down and you bought this house. All these other things, they were having a lot of subprime loans and variable rates, and a lot of things that made it attractive towards buyers, and it created a frenzy of people buying. So that's why when I found my house, it hit the day it hit the market, the morning it hit the market, my realtor, because we were already looking at houses that day, says, Joe, let's stop at this one. The second house I walked in that day, I walked in, I was like, I love it. And they're like, cool, be prepared to offer full asking. And for me, I was like, that's against the law, it felt like. But then in order to get the house, that's pretty much what I had to do, because if you didn't, somebody else is going to. So then I fast forward and I look at what's the market like today and what similar things or patterns that I see. Well, obviously there was a frenzy going on in the market. COVID happens, people are traveling, maybe working from remote. They don't have to live in that city anymore. And that's what really happened to us.
Yeah.
Interest rates were super low, record low rates. And so what did this do? This caused another frenzy, a frenzy of people buying houses. And when there's a frenzy like this, the prices start to skyrocket. And if you look at what housing costs in the year 2000 opposed to 2007, and you look at that graph, I mean, it was going right up. That's what happened in the last 4 years. But this time was different because there really weren't subprime loans like there were then. And there are, but not, I think they tightened up on lending a little bit. However, it did seem a little loose from what I've seen. But however, it was tightened up. So maybe they did learn some last time. But here's the difference. When houses in the beginning of 2019, 2020, 21, you might look at a $300,000 house. Well, that same house, especially where we are in Florida, today is worth $800,000 because people just kept on bidding it up over the last few years. So what happened? I got a house in 2021 and I bought it for, maybe that house was $450 at that time and they buy it. But here was the catch, which is catching people now, I really think is, well, the values kept going up, which now created property taxes to go up. Right? Because the houses were all worth more. The towns are coming in, reassessing them, finding out there's going to be an increase in your taxes. And I see a lot of my friends and family and other real estate investors that said, my house was assessed for this. Now it's worth way more. And now my tax bill just went up huge. The other thing too, is now to insure a house for $300,000, that's fine. But now that house is worth $800,000, it's going to cost you more for insurance. The insurance companies are recognizing they have a lot more on the line now. So what's happening is you maybe bought that house in 2021 for $450, but now the towns and all the ones around you, they're going to start charging you more for your property taxes and insurance. And I'm hearing quite often was my monthly payment jumped up so much I can no longer afford it. Now people need to sell. And when they're going to put their house on the market now, depending where you live, that could be a good or bad thing. So we're going to talk about what I see in the state of the market right now. First, being in Southern Florida where we live.
I was going to say it's so state specific. So obviously you spend a lot of time researching. You keep your ears to the street.
Always to the streets.
You've got your kind of go-to people that you're watching and listening to. So like really encourage everybody to do that. Like where you're investing or planning on investing, like get really familiar with that, because what's happening in one state isn't always the same exact thing that's happening in another.
Well, and you just said it so perfectly. That's the state of the market, guys. It's regional. It depends on where you are. Let me give you an example.
Yeah.
I saw on my Facebook page this morning in Rochester, New York, where we're originally from, it was a message thread between a realtor and a potential buyer looking to put an offer on a property. And the buyer reached out to the agent and said, hey, did we get the property? And they said, no, it went for $130,000 over asking and we missed out.
What town?
somewhere in Rochester.
Oh my, $130,000.
Over asking. And then the realtor says, if you want a house, get some wood pallets and nail them all together because that's the only chance you're going to get a house right now. Like joking with their
Right.
client.
Still.
So it went for 130 over asking. I chatted with my realtor and he said the same thing. They're going for 40, 50, 60,000 over asking. But why is that? Well, in upstate New York and Rochester, for $200,000 to $300,000, you can get a really nice house in a really nice neighborhood, in a really great school district. So if the interest rate went from 3 or 4% to 6 or 7%, that doesn't change the payment a ton. And there's a shortage of inventory. Anybody who bought or refinanced their house and has a really low rate, they don't really want to sell. So what it's causing in Rochester, New York marketplace, especially on the east side of town, going way over asking. If you have a nice house in a nice neighborhood, they're going crazy fast and they're going really high. The only issue is if you're going to sell that house, where are you going to move to? But now we're going to look at Florida, where we're living currently, the Tampa, Sarasota, Bradenton area. Now in this area, it's a little bit different. We went from having a 1.5 month supply of inventory on the market. And I talked to an agent the other day, we have over 6 months supply now. So what does that mean? That means there's a lot of houses on the market and they're just sitting. And I've chatted with a lot of realtors in the last year who say, no, Sarasota, Tampa area, that's not going to go down. No way. The market here is just so strong. There's so many people moving to Florida, which is true. There's a lot of people moving here. But the challenge is the rates, the taxes, the insurance, and now the price of the house, the 4 things are just so high. People aren't buying at these numbers. And I can't tell you how many times where it's so interesting in places like Rochester, New York, they're going for 50 to 100 grand over asking. But yet down here in Sarasota, Tampa, Bradenton, Florida, in a lot of these places, they're doing $50,000, $100,000 price drops at a time, and they're still not selling.
Well, you think too, because like there was such an inflation in these prices, because we came down, and I'll admit it, like I remember we came down in March of 22, and we have a seller reach out on our off-market lead, and we would, go through our script, say the questions, and he's like, oh, I'll get over asking. And I remember watching one in particular, I think it was Venice, Florida. And lo and behold, it wasn't even 5 days later, that thing hit the market and sold that day for well over asking. So again, like those, we're talking like huge price jumps of like what they bought it for, and like doubled almost.
Yeah, and that's what we saw in Florida. And this is where in 2022, I made a post on Facebook and Instagram and saying this cannot be sustained. There's going to be a bubble and it's going to be popping at one point. Now, it doesn't pop like the stock market or things like that. It's a slow thing. The downturn in 2007 was 5 years.
Yeah.
And most of the time it does that. So when they do drop in price, it doesn't happen immediately. But what I could see was impossible to sustain. The one I'm thinking about had a house in Sarasota. This was March when we talked to him of 2 years ago. So it was 2022. He bought his house in November of 2021. I'm talking 4 or 5 months earlier. He just bought a house. When we're chatting, he says, Joe, I want $750 for my house. I go on Zillow. I said, Mr. Seller, I see that you just bought this in November for $600,000 4 or 5 months ago. You must have did a bunch of work to the property since you bought it, and now you're going to get a $150,000 increase. And he says, no, I didn't do a thing to it. I bought the house because the house that I'm building wasn't finished yet. So I bought this house just to live here for a few months, and he bought it for over asking when he bought it. So he buys it for $50,000, $60,000 over asking, closes, moves in November of 2021, March 22, he's asking $750 for it. And I was like, there's no way you're going to get $750,000 for this property. And he was like, want to bet. He puts it on the market and he got like 7 something, like high 7s for it, like even higher than he told me.
And why is it important to like look back as you're looking at things currently? I think that's important because people might be tuning and being like, oh, okay, great. That was 2 years ago, guys. But like, why is it important to note? Like,
so when I see anything, okay, and you could use the stock market, you could use housing, you could use, anything. And when you see a graph of, the increase in value over time, but then all of a sudden you see a dramatic spike where it almost goes straight up, like dramatically, when that happens, there's going to have to be a correction. And that means the prices have to come down eventually. And so I think that's what we're seeing right now, is that correction starting to happen here in Florida. It's not fully at the spot where there's a 20, 30, 40% price drops, but I think it's definitely happening. And a lot of the realtors who I follow or I've chatted with, who a year ago, 2 years ago, they said, no, this values, they're going to continue to go up. It's never going to come down. Real estate doesn't go down. And I remember a couple of them, and now it's quite a different story. And they are seeing that. And when you see the inventory go from a month and a half supply to a 6-month supply, especially in the spring, the busiest season of all, that's really saying a lot. And so I can't imagine, if this trend continues, what's the fall going to be like, where the market typically slows down anyways. Right?
I think it's important too to talk about, the people that just bought, so they're kind of locked into these higher interest rates. Like, I know you don't have a crystal ball and you're not a future teller, but what's going to happen with people that just bought and now they're locked in a 7% interest? So like you just talked about, taxes, insurance, everything's like high, and they need to sell.
You're going to be in trouble. You're going to be in trouble because, and it depends. Maybe if you did that in Rochester, New York,
right,
that's not a terrible thing. You could sell the house and get more than you paid for it. So that's a regional question too. But I will say we have one seller now who reached out to us, and I've chatted with you before about this, but they have a house for sale in Columbus, Ohio,
right,
in the ritzy part of town. Before they bought it, somebody renovated the whole thing. It looks like could be in a magazine. They bought it for $505. They had closing costs to add on top of that. And then they spent like $20,000 on furnishings because they were going to put on Airbnb. I mean, it looks like out of a magazine. And they told us they have $530 all into it, but they had to put a lot of money down to buy the house. Well, what happened was Airbnb wasn't working out for them. So they decided to put it on the market and sell it. They knew they were going to take a loss, but they were willing to cut that loss because the Airbnb really wasn't cutting it. It was like another job. They lived out of state. It was a lot for them. So they listed on the market for $530. Now, when you take a 5 or 6% commission out of that, if you sell it at $530, you're going to be netting out in the high fours. So they're already going to take probably a $40,000 loss if they sell it at $530. Well, it didn't sell at $530, so they dropped the price to $499. It didn't sell at $499. They dropped the price to $475. They reached out to us at the price of $475, and because they were frustrated, it wasn't selling. So when we told the sellers that if we were to buy it for around that price, we could cover the closing costs. We'll buy it, create a finance, which I don't say create a finance, but what we do is we buy it with seller financing, where I'll buy the property. We'll just take over making the payments on their mortgage. So he said, fine, let's go ahead and do that. I tell the seller, we typically buy with no money down. He's like, I don't care. If you guys cover the closing costs and take over my old payment, you could even have the furniture furnished, ready to go. I'm like, wow, it sounds like a great deal. Let's do it. Let me check out what the rest of the deal looks like. His payment with taxes and insurance was $3,400 a month. I look at the interest rate, it was 7.23. So he had a high payment. I look at, well, if I buy this property, what can I rent it for? And the rental comps in the area were only about $2,200 to $2,400. So an investor like myself can't buy that property and put in a renter and then do a long-term rental and expect to make money. I'm going to lose $1,000 a month. So can I do midterm? Can I do short-term? Yes, you can. But if it doesn't pencil out for a long-term rental, I'm not going to buy it hoping that a short-term rental could save the day on that monthly payment. Because if I don't want to do short-term rentals, or conditions change, or there's laws passed that you can no longer do that, because I'm seeing that around the country, and then you're forced to sell, you're in way more than the house is worth, and you're stuck with a payment that's going to be way too high. So in that situation, these folks are in a lot of trouble. And I think I saw the house posted at $459 last. They're going to lose over $100,000 on that deal. this, and they're the greatest, sweetest couple. They just bought it because the market was going up and they got all excited and they want to do Airbnb.
Why aren't they just like keeping up with Airbnb? Like, I feel like it's outrageous.
Because they were losing on it every month.
Ugh.
And they're like, this is a full-time job managing an Airbnb, and I live out of state. And I was like, well, maybe you could hire a company to monitor that and help you with that. He says, yeah, but we're already losing money. So they're just in a jam. They're going to have to cut that cord loose, and they're going to end up losing quite a bit.
So would you consider yourself more conservative when it comes to deal structuring and making deals?
Well, I mean, I'm always conservative, but I always dial back to, if it don't make dollars, it don't make sense. So, like, where's the deal? Just because a seller says, yes, I'll sell you the house with seller financing, but is that a good deal? And you got to be mindful of that, because there's going to be a lot of these deals out there. And if y'all are on Facebook, you'll see a ton of them. I was looking at one today in Newport Richey, Florida. The seller had a 2.37 rate.
Which is nice.
Crazy low. 2.37 rate. So then I look, and the investor who was sharing the deal wants a $55,000 assignment fee. Well, it's down payment, and some goes to the seller, but he's getting assignment fee too. So your cost of entry to buy into the deal is $55,000 plus closing costs. The property, I believe, is like 400 some change. So closing costs on that, you're probably talking another, $8,000. So you're going to need about 60 something plus your insurance policy, right? So what are you going to need? Close to 70.
2 years ago, I feel like those were a dime a dozen.
Dime a dozen, all over the place.
We saw those like all the time. Like
here's the challenge though. So I'm going to need about $65,000, almost $70,000 to buy this deal. I look at what the payment is, and it's $200 more than I could rent the house for. I'm like, wait, I got to come up with $70,000 just to buy this house, the top of the market range, even though the rate is super awesome, just to lose $200 a month. Plus, if you're going to have to pay for management and all these other things.
And all of those things could be negotiables, which is why you're so passionate about, telling people the different ways you can negotiate with sellers, because, if you tell the seller, hey, I will give you $50,000 down.
Oh, yeah.
And to be able to really pare back some of those numbers. Because I think that's like the number one thing for Florida sellers is they all want a lot of down. They want their equity. So some of them are just sitting and waiting. So I think follow-up is like so important.
Follow-up is key. Well, you know what? I have a feeling we'll see that house back on the market or something, because that investor is going to have a hard time getting somebody to give them 65, 70,000 just to lose $200 a month. Even if the deal was no money down and you had to pay $6, $7, $8, $9,000 in closing plus your insurance policy.
You'd be okay with it if it was no money down, no assignment
I still got to
fee.
come up with $15,000 just to lose $200 a month.
Well, what if you did a non-refundable option and then also got a little bit over each month?
That's a lot of risk to break even.
I'm just asking the question.
No, I'm glad you did, because a lot of people are probably wondering the same thing. If anything that's attractive, it was a really nice turnkey house. It was beautiful, and it had a really low rate. So somebody like you and I, if we don't have to worry about that cash flow and we could write off depreciation and things like that, maybe that's not a terrible idea. The only difference is the market rate now in around that area, is it going up? Is it going down, property values, or are they staying the same? Because in my field, what I'm looking at, I almost think they're dropping there. I see a lot of houses that are having price drops.
I think that's going to be like a long-term game.
Yeah.
Real estate usually is, but especially in a pocket like Newport Richey.
Yeah. So you got to be really mindful of the deals. They're tricky. And we have one right now, right outside of Tampa, got brought to me by another investor. This one is in Wesley Chapel, which is like the spot to be. It's a suburb of Tampa. Really nice house. I think it was built in the early 2000s. It's a 3-bedroom, I think 2-bathroom, little over 2,000 square foot house with an in-ground pool. And if you have $3,000, because the sellers lost their job and they're in a jam, they'll let you take over their mortgage. So I could buy this turnkey house with $3,000 down, and I could pay the closing costs. The only challenge is, once again, the payment there with taxes and insurance is between $3,700 there was an escrow shortage. So for the next few months, it's like $4,000, but then after 6 months, it drops to 3,700. So that sounds, I mean, that's high, but 3,700 a month for a house, and it doesn't even rent for 3,000, barely 3,000 a month. So here's where we're just getting brought these turnkey, beautiful houses in a beautiful neighborhood that needs nothing. Although you weren't in love with the bathroom, because
it was just a lot of stone and brick going on. There was
A
a
lot.
fireplace above the tub. I mean, it had its interesting quirks for sure.
but it's a great house, and many people will be thrilled to live in a house like that.
Yeah, and that's such a pickle, right? It's like you want to help the people out, because that's really one of our honestly favorite parts, is being able to help people that they can't be helped any other way. Like, you love being the superhero and saving the day, but at the end of the day, if it doesn't make dollars, doesn't make sense, and you're literally just passing off, losing money to somebody else, that doesn't make any sense either.
Well, that's what you're going to do, is you're going to put your business in harm's way.
Yeah.
And that's a problem, right? So you're going to be seeing more of these deals popping up in the market. So I have a friend in Wisconsin. Shout out Gabe. And Gabe's in Wisconsin, and he said it's very similar to upstate New York right now.
Mm-hmm.
Houses aren't terribly expensive. And he says if you have a house in Wisconsin, especially the Green Bay area, they're selling right away. And they're getting full price, if not going over asking. And he said it's a really competitive market. So he reached out to us and it's like, hey, do you have any seller finance deals that you're working right now in Wisconsin? Because if you do, I want those. So we are digging.
Everybody go start posting those blue ads in Wisconsin. We got to hook up for you.
Yeah. So, and Gabe's the greatest guy. So
really
you'll love him. But that's where I think
for the Prince of Pasco. Yes, Angel.
He is the Prince of Pasco. Thank you for sharing that, Angel. We would have forgot about that.
Good old Gabe.
So here's what I really recommend. If you see a YouTube person or Instagram or TikTok, and they're like, the market is crashing, right? And they do. I don't know why.
It's like one of his pet peeves. I try to get him to do like the funny thumbnails, but
the thumbnail on like YouTube where they all have their mouth open, like, oh, right. Like, guys, if I start doing that, just.
We're not making fun of it. You know what? It's clickbait. It works, like, clearly, but it's just, is the market crashing and pummeling? No,
so
it's not. Like,
that's the point. Well, if you hear somebody saying the market is thriving or the market is crashing, it's probably doing both, guys. It's probably doing both.
It's the market, right? It's
right. Yeah, it depends on where you are. So
and I think too, like, what helps me is, like, I listen to the guy. I mean, you're very knowledgeable, and you've been around for 40 some years now.
I know.
But somebody like Ron LeGrand, he's been through, what do you say, 3 specific cycles where he's been truly, I mean, because he started the year
81.
Yeah. When I was born. So he's been truly investing for that long. So he's seen it do this, and he calls himself Big Papa. If he's seen it, and it's gonna just do that. And so you want to ride the waves properly. You want to do the non-recourse debt, which is why we're all about not putting our name on any sort of debt right now, and helping people when you can.
And a fun fact.
Ooh.
Fun fact. Ron LeGrand, on March 12th, 1981, skipped watching the show Dallas so he can go to his very first real estate convention. And he was a big, big fan of the TV show where, Who Shot JR. I don't know if that was the night where they said, I don't know, a little bit before my time, but I remember the show being really popular.
There's a TV show called Dallas for anybody who's really confused at the moment.
Yeah, there was a TV show in the early 80s.
1981.
That was like the jam. It was like the hotness. Well, Ron decided to skip that episode, and there really wasn't like, hey, watch it again.
There was no recording.
Right. So, but it was either watch his favorite TV show and not miss it, or miss it and go to a real estate convention where he learned about how to buy real estate, which changed the trajectory of not only his life, but thousands of other people like myself and Jen and so many others. So shout out to Ron LeGrand.
Yeah.
In 1981, today's date, for missing that show of Dallas, because now look what he's done.
When I saw that comment on your Facebook, I was like, what is that even?
Yeah, so cool.
Missing Dallas, but okay.
So that's what it was. So,
but yeah, he's somebody too. Like, if you feel like, oh, the sky is falling, it's not. But pay attention, and what can you learn from what he's shared through the years? And
yeah, so I think the one thing is for us is I'm always looking for properties that we can buy.
Opportunity.
That cash flow. the cash flow really, really well. And so if going to the bank and paying 7% rate is not getting you those cash flow deals, well, what do? Not buy? Creative finance comes into play. Because there's many times where we can negotiate even what our monthly payment is with a seller on a free and clear property. On a free and clear property, if we're able to pay their price that they're happy with, but we could have a monthly payment and a long-term length that we're happy with, we both walk away feeling like winners. And if I'm able to have that low payment, now I could put in a tenant and rent it in cash flow, or what we love, rent to own in cash flow. You can still make deals right now. And sometimes these sellers are super frustrated because they're trying to put their house on the market and they're not selling, and they're just having to do price drops. And if they're frustrated with that and they're not being able to sell the house, this is a good alternative to pay top dollar. And Eric, you said it's spot on.
The world is full of crap.
A famous Ron LeGrand quote, and that is definitely one of his.
Yeah, it's a repetitive phrase, or rule number 2.
Yeah.
Everybody's full of poop.
So what it dials back to, guys, is just look for cash flowing properties. And if there aren't any, you can still negotiate and make them work. Now, we do find some deals where they do have a 2% rate or a 3% rate, and those do cash flow. So when I'm looking at a creative finance deal and I'm analyzing a creative finance deal, there's really like a couple of big factors. But the most important that I look at, like right away, that will help me determine, do I look further into this deal or do I kick it to the curb? So I don't spend an hour looking at a bad deal trying to scratch my head. So if you're listening, take some notes on this. Super easy, guys. If I'm buying the property, how much cash do I need to come up with at the closing table? Is it no money down and I'm just paying a few thousand in closing costs and maybe an insurance policy? Or do they want 50 grand down or 80 grand down? It's a big difference. So my first thing is, how much cash do I need to come to the closing table to buy the deal? Then when I do that, what's my monthly payment and what can I rent it for? So if I find the scenario where my payment's $1,500 and I can rent it for, $2 grand, $2,500, and it's a no money down deal besides closing costs, beautiful house, beautiful neighborhood, like sign me up for as many of those as you can. And everybody
into the universe.
Yes. And everybody's looking for those deals right now too. If I have to come up with, like I mentioned earlier, $65,000 just to lose $200-300 a month, guys, I pass on those deals unless we get a huge discount. We're getting a bunch of free equity. What does that mean? The house is worth $500,000 and they're willing to sell it to you for $380,000. Well, then maybe at that point, maybe that is something I'm going to take a little bit closer look at, because if I'm losing money for a little bit per month, we do rent to own, but I'm still not going to do 80 grand down, 70 grand down on a deal where we're losing cash flow. Unless
have you ever put 80 grand down on any deal?
No,
I don't think you have.
Never.
Nor do I think you would, unless it happened to be like
a $5 million property with
a primary residence that eventually one day.
Honey, we typically buy with no money down. So just get that out of the universe altogether. Okay.
Oh, I'm playing. But yeah, I want to talk about another real world example of state of the market here with a property that we recently got back. Because we have a real life scenario, and I think you guys kind of like, the juicy details of what really happens behind the scenes. And so we have a property that we just got back, and
should we share pictures?
I don't know if we really need to. But my point being, we have options, right? With the Creative Finance Playbook, we always have different plays we can run. Guys, I'm not really into football, but we were literally talking about all the different scenarios that you could do with a deal, and that's how we came up with the playbook. Because if one play is not working, then you can, look the other way and, throw it down to some other team member. Horrible analogy there. But the point being is that, we have this property and we had a great monthly payment. I think it's 9 something. Why don't you explain the whole thing?
So we had a seller reach out to us. This was 2017. And in 2017, we had a seller reach out to us and they say, I see you rent properties with rent to own, but do you also buy properties? And
so right there, that was all from Facebook. So if you don't have a Facebook page, make a note that you need to go make one, because it was free marketing on our half.
Yeah. So if you think about it, like we got our first deal, Creative Finance, we had a 0% mortgage. This was the next deal where she had a mortgage, but she was willing to sell us the property for $72,000. I still remember we bought it with $100 down. She had like a $900, $800 a month payment. So what we did was we offer that rent to own, and our renter moved in the spring-ish of 2018.
It was literally March 1st.
Yeah. Moved in 2018. Rented the house for the last 5 years, rent to own. I realized his lease was coming up in February. So I reached out to him in the fall of last year and I said, Mr. Renter, Matt, that your lease is coming up and you have the option to renew it if you want or buy the house. One or the two things are going to happen. He says, I'm going to need 1 more year of renting. So that's fine. We'll just send you out a new lease. Well, come March 1st this year, guys, he didn't pay rent. And so I go to text him and his phone's turned off. So Jen, the next morning, gets an email from him and he says, I've already moved out of the house at the end of February and you guys get the house back. So we're living in Florida. This house is in New York. Guys, don't forget, we bought the house for $72,000, but I only bought it $100 down. I think it was $3,000 or $4,000 in closing costs. Probably not even.
Oh, yeah, it's like $3,000.
$3,000. So, I mean, under $4,000, we own a property. We did put a refrigerator in there. That was about all we did to that house because it came pretty decently done before the previous owner owned it. So we buy the house, put in our renter. He moves out. I talked to my realtor friend. The property value more than doubled. And especially with how hot the market is and where this is located right now, I'm kind of wondering if we could even get higher than what.
So the problem, the dilemma is.
Tell them about that.
So we're at that fork in the road of you have like 3 options really. One, you just clean it out, list it, cash buyer comes in and they do whatever they want with it.
Well, why? Because the house definitely needs some work. This renter left it trashed.
He didn't leave it the best condition, but we did get a non-refundable up front, which he didn't get refunded, and so kind of washes the cleaning costs here at this point. So there's that option, and then there's 2 where we can clean it out, make it nice, which we talked to the contractor. He estimated about, what was it? 20?
He said 17. I say 20, and I think 20 will still be too
much.
About
20,000 to like make it nice, right? So put 20,000 into it to bring that level up of, the type of
quality property.
Yeah, that we would get. And then put a rent to own buyer in there and get that 10% minimum down on the new purchase price, which you'd have to figure out what that would even be. Because again, your future price would be like 2 years from now or so. Or option 3, put the 20 grand into it, list it, and see how much over asking you would get.
Yeah, so that's a good problem to have.
Yeah.
Because at first I was like, well, we just cleaned it out. We'll put it on the market as is. The market's so hot, we still going to get top dollar, way more than we paid for it.
Yeah.
I'm like, that's not a great option. However, if we put 20,000 into it, the sky's the limit with this property and what we can get for it. So that's very tempting too. But then I'm like, well, if we do that, we're going to kill the goose that laid the golden egg. And what do I mean by that? Is because that thing would rent. If we put that rent to own, we'll get 15, 20 grand down, no problem on that house, which means if we put 20 into it, we're going to get all that money back the day they move in, chances are. Not only that too, to get $1,700, maybe even $1,800 a month for rent there would fly off the shelves. And so we could cash flow a good $800, $900 a month on that deal. So this is where I lean back into. At first, my first thing was Jen's like, all right, let's just sell it. I'm like, yeah, she brings up a good point. Then I'm like, well,
I said that.
I got the text.
Oh.
I got it in writing, actually.
Oh, gosh.
Like,
well, then once I thought about it.
Yeah, you were the one that then changed my mind. You're like, no, I think we should keep it. I'm like, well, I think you're right again.
Yeah. So, but it's funny because it's like those discussions that you have. I mean, we have a lot of moving parts, a lot going on. So the easy thing in my head at first is just sell it, right? But then you think about it, okay, well, we have great boots on the ground, reliable contractors. We know the scenario. You grew up down the road, basically. So you know my
parents grew up across the street from the house. Both of them did. So I know the area really well. It's in the great spot, great school district.
Yep.
It's actually in like one of the hottest zip codes in the entire country right now, what realtor.com said, because it's close to the, the beach, parks, great location. So this is where we kind of dial back to. We're going to keep this and do rent to own. And it just makes sense as far as why get rid of a door. You could get a 6-figure check, which sounds great. But once again,
I couldn't believe when I pulled up the mortgage statement how little was left on it. I was like, oh my gosh.
I've been making them payments for a long time. So
5 years flew by. Well, I guess 6 years really. Flew by really fast.
Yeah. So once again, when you own your own business, for me, I want to keep cash flowing properties. I definitely love those. So this is going to just turn into a little bit of a nest egg for us. And in 5 more years, especially in that town, if the area just keeps booming like it is, who knows how much more that's going to be worth.
And it just goes back to, again, like the sellers that we seem to really attract and that need our help the most and I just went live on Jen Buys 585 today about that, were the accidental landlords. And I shared how that house I bought with $1,000 down. I was an accidental landlord because I moved into your house and I had a roommate, but she was only giving me half of what the mortgage payment was. So that obviously wasn't even covering my payments. And I moved in with you and now we had this house. It was in the city. And it's kind of funny looking back. Should have kept that one too, but.
Because you didn't plan on buying the house to be a landlord and be a rental. You bought it as your own house until you met me. And then next, you're a landlord accidentally. And this is exactly what happened with
this house.
With that house. And to make it even more fun, she lived there single. She meets a guy. They buy a bigger house, has a family. They turn this house into a rental. And she told me that the renters moved out in the middle of the night and left it kind of a mess. And what she didn't want to do was have to fix it all like what she did and then have to worry about that again. She wanted to have it sold. So now that's our thing. And for what he did, it was all cosmetic stuff, except for there's a few spots in the wall where I don't know if he was punching the wall or I hope he was putting his head into the wall to leave those holes because of how he left the place. I'm going to say it, our renter, without us knowing, was growing pot in the house because our contractor went there, I know, and saw some hanging that he left behind. Trash all over the place, smelled like dog. So obviously all of the flooring's coming out. All of the walls are going to get fixed. The new refrigerator we bought kicked the living snot out of it.
If you've been following our journey, this is the refrigerator that somebody delivered in the middle of winter of February 2018 and apparently slipped and fell. And we didn't get noticed until 2 years later during COVID. And luckily we had great insurance.
Yeah, we got somebody knocked on the door, asked if I was Joe Delafave. I said, yes. They said, you're being served. I look at the paperwork. The installers, when they were bringing over the fridge, somebody tripped and fell in the driveway, hurt himself. This person did have a history of falling down on the job, flights of steps and all this. So, I mean, whatever. But the guy hurt himself. A year and 9 months later, we get this letter in the mail saying that we're being sued. They just went to insurance. Insurance took care of it, but that's why it's important. So that refrigerator.
It was heart-wrenching and like gut-wrenching when we see this photo of this beautiful fridge, like all dented. And
kick the snot out of it.
This is another reason why we always say do not put appliances into your properties. You can if you want, but that was the last that we will ever do because we thought we were doing the right thing because the fridge that we had in there didn't really work well. And we're like, oh, we should do the right thing and supply a fridge.
See, I should have took out the fridge and thrown it to the curb and never let him saw it.
I guess so, but karma, whatever. But yeah, so that's what. Stay tuned. We'll be broadcasting what we're doing with this beautiful Rochester, New York home. That it's got a funky layout, so we have to figure. I know we don't do this, but I would love to fly up there and just like.
I don't want to go to New York. It's way too cold.
Joanna and ship it. It's been a while since we've done that, but yeah.
No, we're going to do that from a distance, and that's why it's great to have.
A little at a distance.
Yeah,
so
it's great to have good boots on the ground.
We had a couple of questions popping in here. We got one from YouTube. Do you sell the Playbook? So yes, we do.
Yeah, it's called the Creative Finance Playbook, but really what it is, we have a coaching program. It's not like some big book. We actually just walk you through step by step from the very beginning of this process to the very, very end of you just closed your first deal and now you own a property. And I've noticed too, if you just try to rely on YouTube videos or a book or courses, that really doesn't get you the success rate that we got with our clients. And the reason why is because when you have somebody who's done a lot of these deals, look over your shoulder the entire process, and make sure you're doing all the little right steps. That's what gets the results. Somebody's going to hold your hand through the process. And I noticed a lot of times when somebody reaches out, they say, Joe, my first thing is I need to know how to do paperwork, or I need to set up my LLC, or what. Guys, go talk to sellers.
Mm-hmm.
Go talk to a seller who needs some help. Try to figure out if you could help them with their real estate issue. And that's the first thing that we really talk about is mindset, some branding, how to generate leads for free. Because I don't know any other real estate investor who can help get hundreds and hundreds of off-market property leads for free without spending any money. So we call it the Creative Finance Playbook because there's so many different plays to run, but actually with our coaching program, that's what it is. So if you're interested, we'd love to chat more. You could just drop a message here or call my cell phone, 585-207-2240. And we could schedule a call. The longer you are in the property, the more you will make. Ain't that the truth? That's why for us on that one, I definitely think we should keep it. And that goes with anything. Eventually, if real estate does drop, guys, it does come back up. Do you guys use a TC or do you have one in-house? We've done both. We've had one in-house that worked part-time. I don't recommend doing that because with part-time attention, things get missed, things get dropped, or they're only able to handle it during certain times. So, you're trying to grill dinner and you're supposed to be on the call. Nope. Hire a company. That's what we've done. We've hired people who are already well-trained, who are focusing on how to be a TC, and that was huge. In the beginning, I did all of it. So you don't really need a TC if you have a great attorney who knows how to do these deals. The only time you're going to need a TC to step in is if you're doing a lot of deals or if you're starting to wholesale a lot of deals, then it becomes helpful. But if you're looking for your very, very first deal, you don't need a TC quite yet.
I know, that's well said.
You're in Pasco. Yeah, there's a ton of different things going on in Pasco County right now. This was an area where 10 years ago, these houses were selling for 30 grand, 40 grand. And now they're all worth 200,000, 300,000, which is pretty wild of the appreciation over the last 10 years. But as Tampa is becoming unaffordable for some people. So they're moving a little bit further north. And that's what happens.
He's just saying, that you can get a lot of cheap appliances. So that's what we did back in Rochester. We would say like, hey, go check out this place. They've got some great appliances. So you're not responsible.
Yeah. And that's what we would do. And I'd highly recommend doing that again.
I know, Ed, sorry. I don't know why it's not connecting. It pulls some people's names, but now I saw on my phone though. Yep. We know it's you. Thank you. And then how are we structuring insurance? I'm going to point you to our YouTube channel, or you can go find it on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. We did an excellent interview last year around this time with James Jenkins. If you put in Creative Finance Playbook, James Jenkins, Riskwell Insurance, he does an excellent job breaking down step by step. It is imperative that you do your insurance correctly. And I can't tell you how many people I run into and they are buying sub 2 and they are just doing a few things that are like red flags. And so you just want to make sure that you're not doing those things because you need to have things properly structured. So go check out that video. We did a really nice and lengthy talk with him.
Yeah. And if you're trying to piece together how to do these type of deals on your own, just watching some YouTube videos, you're going to set yourself up for failure. And even scarier is you're going to sometimes set your seller up for failure too. If you're taking deed to the property the wrong way, don't have the insurance set up the right way, don't make payments on time because you don't have the right information, guys, you are asking for that due on sale clause to be called on you. Okay. And I could tell you how many investors that I've chatted with, some that come to our meetups and they say, I don't have any coaching. I don't want to get into coaching. But I did try to buy a property this way, and now I'm having all these issues happen. I'm like, well,
just got to be careful because you don't want to put yourself in a situation. And I don't want to say more importantly, but kind of more importantly, your seller, because that's their credit on the line and their situation. So just make sure you're doing all the things properly.
So if you're looking for your very first deal and it's creative finance and a seller has a mortgage on the property and you're going to buy the property but keep that mortgage in their name and you're going to take over making those payments on their behalf because it's a really low rate or really low payment, you got to have some cash set aside just in case your renter doesn't pay. You still have to pay. You have to pay. And that's part of the obligation of doing this. So you got to make sure that you're protecting your seller. And that's really key. And you also don't want to put your seller into harm's way by not having the insurance set up the right way or any of these other things that really could cause some issues for them and you. Because you could turn it into a mess quickly.
Yeah. This one is from Manny Torres. Since you are doing rent to own, are renters able to have pets?
Yeah.
Pets are fun, aren't they? So just be prepared. I mean, yes, we allow it, but if they have a dog, your house is going to smell like a dog.
Well, that's the point. You're going to have, we have one. We just got it back too. Our renter left the property because he met somebody who lived on the other side of town. They're getting serious. He moved into her house because she won't live on that side of town. Not like it's a bad side, but she's got her own spot where she wanted to live close to family. And he had a dog. Well, we got the house back. And guess what, guys? You might treat your house like gold. You might not let your dog use your house as a bathroom. But what you do doesn't mean all people have that same common sense. And some people do that. So now that could cost you quite a bit of money if they decide to move out. Hence why it is a non-refundable option deposit. He never even asked for any money back and really said, I feel bad because I wanted to buy the house. Joe and Jen, you guys are awesome, but I'm moving in with her so you guys get the house back. So we had to spend some good money on there. The cleaning bill was outrageous. If you were the cleaners who cleaned the house and you're watching, geez, charged way too much.
Mike.
But either way, now the house is looking back to beautiful again. And
yeah, we've got some great applicants in there. And again, we use screenthetenant.com. And April 2nd, we have Paul and Diane Ritter who own that company. And they're excited to come and share with you guys all the nitty gritty things on how to properly place rent-to-own tenants.
And the success is in the details.
That's like your second favorite word. All right, I got an Instagram comment over here. Average length of time for creative financing deals, 3, 5, or 7 years. Thanks.
Okay. I mean, I like where we're starting here, but I generally like to get 10 to 30 years.
So yeah, favorite is length of the loan, if there is a loan.
Yeah. So favorite's like that 30-year term length. And we've done a bunch of those, guys. So don't think it doesn't happen. And the ones that we've done 30 years on, a bunch of those had a lot of equity. I'm talking $50,000, $60,000, $70,000 of equity, and the sellers are willing to wait up to 30 years to get that. So you don't know until you ask. And so I don't do anything less than 5 years at all. I just won't, because that puts me and it puts my renter in a really tough spot for us to be able to get them cashed out really soon. So if I have a seller who says, Joe, I want this done in 2 years, well, then I better have a really, really big discount on the property, because sometimes that's what happens is a seller will reach out to us and they offer us a really big discount, and they might even be open to seller financing, but they don't want to wait 10, 20, 30 years. So if I have a big enough discount, there's many times where I will buy it with seller financing. We'll clean them up, make them nice, some light cosmetic stuff, and then we'll immediately list it on the market with a realtor and sell it. And that's when we get them cashed out. But in order to do that, I have to have a pretty big discount for that to work. So for me, if I'm going to plan on turning this into a rental or a rent-to-own property, the minimum really, I mean, I don't even like to say this out loud, would be 5 years, but preferably I want 7, 10, 15 years or more.
Right. The one that we're doing up in Buffalo, that one's how long?
Which one?
The one you blocked up on the call.
Well, we agreed a 6-year term on that, but because of the situation, that might change and be a little longer now.
Okay. Okay, no silly questions here. I don't know, so asking, is there a benefit Propstream brings that you can't find on the MLS? I have a fellow agent that used to use Propstream, have dropped it since getting the MLS. saying they are the same, but I'm looking for other opinions. So Propstream versus MLS.
Well, the MLS doesn't tell you how many properties that seller owns. The MLS doesn't tell you what they owe on their mortgage, where Propstream does. So I think they both have their benefits. I'm not a realtor. I don't have access to MLS. I use Propstream, and I talk to a lot of realtors who have no idea that the interest rate that that person has on their loan is at 3%, but it tells me in Propstream, right? It tells me what their payment is.
So I don't know if a realtor is going to help. I guess it doesn't matter. Why would they know? Because usually they know.
I mean, think about when we just sold our house in New York. They didn't know what we owed on our mortgage or what our interest rate was or what our monthly payment was. The realtor never asked, right? So a lot of times they don't even know that information. Propstream has it all. It tells you what the rate is. Now, I will tell you a couple things on Propstream is the rate is not 100% accurate. If it says 2.9, it could be 2.75. It could be 3.25. It's around that range. But I found, it's pretty close, but it's not 100% accurate. Number two, that payment that's on Propstream that it shows what the monthly payment is, that's not including taxes or insurance or HOA or any other things that go along with it. It's just the payment with the principal and interest only. So great question. I like Propstream. I'm probably going to do a live on Propstream and show you how we're finding some of these deals.
Yeah, who would like that?
Yeah, right. Drop us a comment if you want to see me go live and how the things that I do to find creative finance deals on Propstream. So if you want to see that, say yes below, drop a little fire sign or something like that. And if you want to see that, if I get enough of these, we'll do that.
Even on a weekend. So people who are working, they can.
Whoa, I see a do it.
Woohoo.
All right, I just see two. So
Have you ever used PropWire? They're just like similar service, probably.
I've never used it.
Never used it. Okay.
I don't know.
All right, you're getting some yeses. So.
I got it. Okay, now they're pouring.
Ooh, there's the fire sign.
All right, so then here's what we're gonna do. We're gonna have to create an event, which will be obviously all y'all will be invited to. And what I'll do is I'm gonna pull up Propstream Live, and I'm gonna show you exactly what the searches that I do and things that I look for to find these creative finance deals and even some cash deals too. But the creative ones, this has been really the thing lately.
Yeah.
Oh, we've had a good jam session today.
I know. And then I forget, like we're literally like live TV to people probably. Like we're like reality TV. Like how's the Pensacola deal going? Like people know what's going on.
The contractor went there again yesterday.
Oh, contractors. Gotta love them. They get busy and things happen. So we had to, you were talking to like 3 or 4, weren't you? To try to.
Yep.
He got in. We've got the roof quote. So what are we doing with, like, we're moving? Just
getting everything coordinated when we're going to get started. Floors, paint, roof.
Floors, paint, roof.
Floors, paint. Oh.
Do you have like an ETA?
And the seller, I got some pictures from the contractor. The seller had like these makeshift like tents up in the backyard. So I don't know what they were doing out back. I have no clue. It wasn't like it was like a homeless camper.
Okay.
And there wasn't like people camping out back. I don't know if maybe welcome to Florida, weird stuff happens. But I don't know if maybe just being in the backyard was so hot and so sunny, they put up like these big tarps like up high so you could sit in your backyard and not be in the blazing sun. I don't know, but it's all got to come down. So.
Oh, they're still up.
Oh, yeah.
Did it like kill the grass and everything?
I don't know. Yeah, maybe they're glamping in the backyard at this house. Could be. I'm going to tell you, Florida does a lot of Florida things. And that wouldn't surprise me. And if you haven't seen my YouTube video of me walking a property in Sarasota, I highly recommend you go there. It's a Facebook short, Creative Finance Playbook on, not Facebook, I'm sorry, on YouTube. And go watch that video.
So we have Josh Olive. I got the initial pictures for you and connected you with Chris to contact.
Thank you so much. There it is.
I knew like there was a couple pieces and moving parts, and then things were happening, so we were hoping.
Chris's truck died, but he got a new one, so now
something crazy. So yeah, we're super grateful you got over there.
Yeah.
And now there's tents glamping.
Glamping, like canopy.
I need these photos. See, like the world needs to see some of this crazy stuff because that's the problem. It goes to his phone, and then that's the abyss sometimes because it's literally always on charger.
I have this thing. I mean, it was dead by like noon today, and it's a new phone. It gets used a lot.
Awesome. Thanks, Earl, for being here. What is the highest interest rate you've bought? Ooh, was that including back when we?
So if we burned a property, our highest rates were like in the 5s. Those were commercial loans, but we burned so long ago was the last time we've ever done that. I mean, you're talking 6, 7 years ago. We don't do that. So when we're buying with seller financing, if it's a free and clear property, the highest rate, they're typically 0%. We've got one that I bought at 1.5% interest. That's the one in outside of Boston. If we take over someone's existing mortgage, then that's whatever their rate is. However, I will say, I don't know, 5, 4. I don't think we've ever had an interest rate in the 6s or higher ever. So if I had to guess, maybe we took over somebody's mortgage.
I think like one of the least mortgages, the one in Pennsylvania, because Pennsylvania, they got some very inexpensive houses. So.
Oh yeah.
I think we said BRRRR, like.
Oh, bird.
Not burn, like ow, or like.
Yeah, so BRRRR stands for buy, renovate, refinance. Oh, no, I'm sorry, rent, refinance, and then repeat. It's called BRRRR.
And I was like, you guys, I had no idea that this was a thing. And all of a sudden I fell into like Investor World on Instagram and there's hashtags and I read it. I was like, we were doing this. And he's like, what? I'm like, this BRRRR thing. And he was like, yeah, like.
Well,
so
and
funny.
We didn't even know we were doing that. I just worked at a car dealership, guys. I knew some people at the bank, and I asked them if I were to buy a house, would they do a cash out refinance? And they said they would. That's what we did.
Nope, we didn't. Well, you could get burned doing BRRRR. We did not, but we don't recommend BRRRing.
Well, even right now, like that's where I got all the heat. Is I made a post that says BRRRR sucks.
BRRRR sucks.
And everybody's like, you don't know what you're doing. You're a clown, like all the things. And I'm like, we've done a bunch of these, like a bunch, like successfully, where we bought the property, paid cash, we renovated it. And then when I went back to the bank, not only do we take out the money that we originally invested, but the bank actually gave us more money that we invested. So we were able to take out 10, 15, 20,000 extra because we bought it right. And we had the projection of what we're going to get it done for that cost. So I knew when I got it appraised, I know the bank was going to appraise it for a high amount. When I refinanced it, I think they did a 75% loan to value. So if the house was valued at 100 grand, they'll give you 75,000 back, but we would only have into the project 50 grand. And so that's what we would end up doing and put all the extra money back in your pocket tax free and grow your portfolio. But then what happens is eventually the bank will cut you off. You can't have unlimited loans with them. And that's what got us into creative finances. When we were 2016, I was at the bank. My buddy says, Joe, at 10 mortgages, we cut you off. So you need to figure something else out. And when I went home and I saw Ron the Grand on YouTube talking about how to do
You're like, take my money, Ron.
He said, we do the pretty house business. We don't have to worry about buying junkers no more. We could buy beautiful turnkey houses in beautiful neighborhoods without going to the bank, without coming up with huge money down. No more junkers, no more renovations. These are beautiful houses. And then once I saw that, it was all over. And we hired Ron's team to be our first coach back in 2017. And after we did that, I mean, it was all over. When we fell in love with that, and our very first deal that we did with Creative Finance was a free and clear property that Jen and I bought with $100 down, couple thousand in closing costs, turnkey. We had a 0% mortgage and a $500 a month payment. Now, tax insurance were a few hundred more, but this property rented for a lot more than that. And it didn't need to, we weren't putting roofs and new kitchens and bathrooms and carpet and paint, and you didn't have to. Once in a while, you might do like a little paint, something small, but most of the time you're just buying it, clean them up real nice, and put them on for rent to own. When I found that, we fell in love. And when you have to keep on going back to the bank and they're in control if you're going to get this next house or not, I hated that. And when we learned that we could buy real estate without banks, without having to pay cash, this is what kind of fell in love in using leverage.
Mm-hmm. So do you think we'll stick to more seller finance if these rates stay 6+ for a while? This is from Zach.
Zach, great question. I'm always looking for the free and clear properties for seller financing because we could dictate what our payment is. However, it's like 60-something% of people who have mortgages have an interest rate right now under 4%. So if somebody bought a house in the last 12 months and rates were high, they're going to be the challenging ones. But if somebody bought a house prior to that, 2022, 2021, or even beyond, and they just refinance it in 21 or 22, and they have that 3.3 rate, 2.75 rate, there's a lot of those out there. Now, some of those people are never going to want to get rid of that property, but there are some that need to, and those are the people that we're looking to help.
Definitely dig back in. I know we've done like a whole podcast on rent to own, but the long and short of it is you want to really take a good look at the housing prices currently, the trends, and then
price it what it's going to be worth in 2 years when your renter's hopefully at that point of buying, because they're not buying it today. So I'm not pricing it at today's price. I'm pricing it as if I give them 1 year or 2 years to rent it, I'm going to price it to that point. So in 2 years when they're ready to buy, and I'm going to take a guess. I'm going to take an educated guess, right? But you could always go down, but you can't go back up. So price it accordingly, because there's many times Jen and I would have the discussions.
Yeah, they were discussions, all right.
She thought we had the price too high. I thought we had the price fair enough, and come looking back, we didn't have.
We were both wrong.
We were both wrong. They should have been both. All of them should have been higher.
Yeah.
So
when you're doing rent to own, definitely take some time to figure out what that number should be.
Yeah, and then once again, if their term is up, we don't ever kick anybody out. We just let them renew it. But those new terms and new rent is going to obviously go to market rates, whatever that means.
We have Ivan Delgado here.
Ivan!
What's up? Would you do a deal where the seller is willing to let you take over their payments but wants their money up front?
Depends on how much money they want up front is the answer. If I can keep my cost of entry pretty low, I will definitely do that deal, especially if I'm able to cash flow. So what does that mean? Sometimes I run into a seller who has 10, 20, 30,000 of equity. Maybe I give them $5,000 down and then give them the rest down the road when my renter buys. But that only means how much money am I making on the cash flow per month too. If I'm able to make good money on the cash flow, I got to give a little bit of money to do that. As long as the numbers fall in line with, I look at it's my cash on cash return. How much am I dishing out? How much money am I going to make back? What's that percentage? And I generally like to have over a 20%. Many of our deals are infinite because when we do rent to own, our renters give us money down, and then you're just making cash flow. Great question.
Yeah. And then I'll end it out with this one here. Sorry, I lost Facebook. Thanks to Lavina. If you buy the property with seller finance free and clear down the road, if the seller wants to do a HELOC on the property, is it not possible anymore for the seller because the property is no longer under their name?
That is correct. The property, you own it now. The previous owner is just the bank. So all you're doing is you're going to be making payments to them. They can't take out money against a property that they don't own. So that's why I love buying it with seller financing. We own it and we're just making payments directly to the seller. Yeah.
Okay. And then Ed, he's having a little trouble with some rent-to-own buyers. It takes time, I will say that, to really make sure you're placing the right person. And, just maybe go back to the drawing board, making sure you're getting in the right rooms with the right people who could help, because there's definitely a good process to have set up there.
Yeah, and I think the process is huge. Luckily, we had some really good coaching on how to do this. Mm-hmm. And it's really creating a buzz. Let me tell you the number one thing that I've always noticed.
Yeah.
People are payment buyers. If I were to sell all of you listening a house for $5 million, but your payment was only $500 a month for the rest of your life, every one of us could own a $5 million house. It's not always just the price. It comes down to the monthly payment. So for us, I keep the monthly payment according to what market rent is. Therefore, I drive up a ton of interest because of the opportunity. Plus, we got to make sure we market it the right way. The big signs in front yard, Craigslist, Zillow. I mean, like, you got to put in all the places, but
yeah, it's like almost I mean, I can't say a full-time job because you had a full-time job, but we had 5 rent-to-own properties available. But you definitely have to stick with it for a little while to find the right person and just have the processes in place. And I think Pat Live was huge for us. So spending a little bit of money, making sure you have that availability to screen some phone calls, the Facebook Marketplace, the Craigslist, the Zillow, the Facebook page. I mean, I would every day get on a treadmill and make a post on this silly little 585 lease to own, which nobody even knew what I was saying. And so funny, today was like one of the first posts where I put a picture of Conrad Drive up there.
Yeah.
And it used to be a white colored house with these 2 ugly bushes and this little ugly yellow sign with your writing on it. And, we all start somewhere, but you can't market it enough. And I think that might be an issue for some folks where you think you're doing it enough, but you have to actually like 10x it even more. And so hiring people, getting those signs out there and just going all out, because it works and it works everywhere, but it takes time and you just got to keep going.
Well, because we've done it in big cities. We've done it in some very, very small town USA too.
Yeah.
It definitely works. And here's what I've learned from probably the best coach doing it is Ron LeGrand, is for me, I would rather wait to find the right renter, right, who has enough of a money to put down on as a deposit for the deal, as a non-refundable option deposit. I rather wait than just take any person who's got a few bucks to their name. I want to find somebody who's going to want to own it, treat it the right way, but they also have a large non-refundable option deposit down. So that does take time. And I always say you want to give yourself some time to find the right fit. Where the struggle comes in is if you're making that payment on an empty house and you're starting to feel a pinch of that, and then you start to feel like a little bit desperate, like, hey, this is draining me. For us, we always had some cash to be able to take care of those payments, knowing that when I find the right rent-to-own person, I'm going to get all that money back and then some. So if I've got to wait 2 months, if I got to wait 3 months, 4 months, 5 months, even to find the right person who's got 20, 30 grand down, I will wait. Because the more skin in the game they have, the better it is for everybody. Trust me. The people who give you a couple grand down are going to be
not fun to work with. And they're not going to have a good time qualifying because they need more money to make that happen.
Yeah. I mean, if you think about it too, like we help people get the American dream. So it's pretty awesome. We've turned a lot of renters into homeowners with the way that we do it. So having a good, successful track record and helping people, and yes, it's not against the law to make money too. That's a good thing. You got to be profitable. So yeah, you're going to help people. You're going to make a bunch of money. I would say more than important than anything, systems and processes and getting good coaching on how to do it the right way makes all the difference in the world. Don't just try to figure this stuff out on your own because you'll bang your head against the wall like I think our renter did in that one house who put all those holes in the drywall. I love the look on your face when I say that.
It's a great visual. I can only imagine.
Oh, I could see it happening.
Oh my God.
So stay tuned next week.
Yeah, I want to say we have some clients coming on, if I'm not mistaken. So hopefully they can, the dynamic duo here, the mother-daughter team, I'm hoping that we can definitely, so we should be good to go with Miss Natalie and Carrie.
Next Tuesday?
Next Tuesday.
Stop it.
Yeah.
Oh
it's an awesome day. So Tuesday, 2 p.m. Eastern, we're going to have this power couple coming in, mom and daughter duo.
What a success story.
Yeah.
Current clients of ours came to us, I think around October, has done a bunch of deals, guys. And they're in California. They're doing it virtually all over the country.
Yeah, we'll let them share more. And then if you're local or you want to make the drive next Tuesday, so a week from tonight, we are having our meetup 1 week early. We're now doing it once a month. It's usually the last Tuesday, but we have plans the last Tuesday of this month. So next Tuesday, 1 week from tonight, the 19th, we are meeting at Oscara, downtown Bradenton. So we have people driving across the coast of Florida. We've got people who come in from Georgia. We've had people who are just coming to Florida for a vacation and they planned it to make sure they could come to the meetup, but it is super low key. It is not stuffy and formal. We do a lot of networking. We make sure everyone can kind of connect and chat. So if you're around, please stop by. If you need details, reach out to us and our team, and come back next week as we interview Carrie and Natalie.
It's going to be a great show, guys. You're in for a treat next week.
Yeah, it'll
Do
be so
not
fun.
miss this one.
Ladies rule. So you are so welcome, Gavin. Thanks for being here, guys. It's Jen and Joe Delafay with the Creative Finance Playbook, and we encourage you to go talk to those sellers and work on making those creative deals. Bye, guys.
See you guys.